Well, I'm Deanna Dawson with the Justice at Stake campaign, and I'm really excited about this last panel that we have here today. We have 11 of our most distinguished jurists from across the state here, and I'm really excited about it. And I think there's something really powerful just about seeing this panel of people sitting up here and the fact that all these judges care about this issue so much, care about diversity on our bench, and are here today to support that goal. I'm not going to read you all the bios of all our panelists, because if I did that, I would spend immediately our hour and 15 minutes, because again, they are a distinguished panel, but their bios are in your materials, and I would commend them to you. But we are joined today by Chief Justice Barbara Madsen of the State Supreme Court. We've got Judge Patrick Oishi, who is the newest judge of our King County Superior Court bench. We've got Judge Veronica Alicia Galvan, who is the Des Moines Municipal Court judge. We have Judge Michael Spearman, who is a judge with Division I of the Court of Appeals. Judge Deb Fleck from the King County Superior Court. Judge Eileen Katoh from King County District Court. Judge Eric Lucas from the Snohomish County Superior Court. Judge Tam Bowie, who is a Snohomish County District Court judge, and Judge Carol McCrae, who's also on the Snohomish County District Court. And we've got Judge Marilyn Peja from the Kitsap County District Court, and Judge Ricardo Martinez, who is a federal judge with the Western District of Washington Federal Court. I've asked each of our judges to spend about 3 minutes each. I said 3 minutes because I figured they'd each take some more time than that. But to spend just a few moments telling you a snapshot of how they got on the bench and a couple pieces of advice that they would give you based on their own experiences. And then hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time wrapping up with some common themes that I saw running through each of the judges' stories, because I had the benefit of being able to talk to each of these judges for about an hour and really get more in depth of their story. And I would recommend to all of you that if you can, sit down with some of these judges, talk to them at the networking reception we have immediately after this, and talk to them, because their stories are powerful and they're all very encouraging, and they all want you to run for judge. So let's start with Chief Justice Madsen. And do you have a mic? Let's make sure everyone has mics, because we are recording this so that people can watch it later, and so we can have people from other parts of the state be able to hear these stories as well.
Just read the whole thing. All right, that works. All right. Okay, well, thank you for inviting me to this august panel. I've heard a number of the judges on this panel tell their stories, and so I'm going to take very little time because they have some great stories among these distinguished jurists. So, but in terms of getting to the bench, it was never my thought to become a judge when I went to law school, and I was thinking about why would that have been, and it was probably due in part, at least, to the fact that there was no woman on the Superior Court bench in this state until 1970, and I didn't graduate law school till 77. So there really hadn't been women judges. So that's probably partly why I never thought I would be on the bench. And what really motivated me to seek the Supreme Court position, which I did in 1992, was, frankly, those of you who probably heard this before, what were the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings in the U.S. Senate. And the outrage that I felt, along with a lot of other women in this country, at the treatment of Anita Hill before the Senate, and in particular, I think the way that I felt about her story, I could actually relate 100% to what she said her treatment was by her boss then, Clarence Thomas. And I thought, there's such a lack of understanding of what women deal with in this legal profession, in this society, in general, in the workplace. There needs to be a woman at the table, at the highest table in the profession that we all belong to, whether it be the corporate world or the world of law. And so it occurred to me that we needed a woman at our state Supreme Court, and that's what motivated me to run. And I will tell you, it's really not easy to run elections. So the piece of advice that I would have to give you is, if you decide to run for a position or seek appointment for a position, you should do it because it's part of your passion. Being on the bench means something to you more than just having the title judge or wearing a black robe. If you do it for a reason, like I did, that is to give women a voice on the Supreme Court, it makes all of those daily trials and tribulations of running or seeking an appointment to the bench worthwhile, because you know that at the end of all of this, you had a reason to do it, and it keeps you going, and when you accomplish it, you actually have something that you will contribute day after day. So my advice is, think about why you want to be a judge, and make sure that it's a reason that's more than just wanting to wear the black robe. And prepare yourself for some tough days, but keep that passion in your mind.
Thank you so much, Justice Madsen. Next, we're going to turn to Judge Patrick Oishi, who was just recently appointed last week to the King County Superior Court.
Thank you, Deanna, and thank you for having me to this very distinguished panel. As Deanna said, I actually got some wonderful news on Saturday before Mother's Day that Governor Gregoire had just appointed me to the King County Superior Court bench. So I was ecstatic, and she actually told me she wanted to call me on Saturday as opposed to Monday so that my mother and wife had great Mother's Day gifts. So it actually was very considerate of the governor, and I'm very grateful for the confidence that she's shown in me. I have, a fairly diverse background as far as professionally. After I graduated from college here at Seattle University, I was a school teacher. Then I went on to law school. I was a prosecutor, also was a civil litigator, and most recently, yesterday was my last day actually, I was on the bench in Pierce County Superior Court as a commissioner. One of the things that the governor and I talked about was my diverse background and diverse life experiences. For example, my life as a school teacher. The governor didn't really bring up what I thought, might be concerns that she might have had about me as an appointee, but I kind of was proactive in my discussion with her. And so I brought up my age, for example. I'm 43, so I tend to be on the young side of the appointees. And what I impressed upon the governor was kind of the diverse life experience I brought, specifically talking about being a parent, being a school teacher, and different things, and apparently that resonated well with her. I also brought quite a bit of experience as a trial lawyer, and I think anyone who's been a trial lawyer will tell you that, having a lot of experience in the courtroom is absolutely beneficial. The one thing that being in court a lot and trying a lot of cases taught me more than anything is kind of people skills, how to get along with people, how to communicate with folks. And those are things that Governor Gregoire and I talked about, those types of skills that I gained as a trial attorney. I actually, as soon as I got down, and I'm not taking a phone call, I took some notes on my iPhone as soon as I got out with the governor about the things that she said she was looking for in her next appointee. And after she went through the list, as she was finishing her list, and it went on for some time, I thought to myself, gosh, she's looking for the perfect judge. And literally 1 second later, she said, Pat, as you can see, I'm looking for the perfect judge. And I assured the governor that I was not perfect, that I had room for growth, but that I was up for that challenge. But some of the things that she spoke to me about, and this is just kind of a short list: integrity, great legal acumen, work ethic, fairness, allowing litigants to be heard. A big issue for her was facilitating the administration of the court. And she absolutely is not looking for a judge who's going to sit in his or her own courtroom and operate it like a fiefdom. She wants someone that's going to be active on the bench and active in the administration of the courts. And again, I'm very grateful to the governor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next, we're going to turn to Judge Veronica Alicia Galvan.
Good afternoon. I'm Judge Veronica Alicia Galvan. I'm with Des Moines Municipal Court, and so for me, it was obviously a very different path. I graduated from law school and began working with the city attorney's office here in the city of Seattle. I was very fortunate that from a very young age, I've always had mentors. As a matter of fact, I was just reminiscing with Judge Martinez here that the first time I ever met him was when I was in Bellingham at Western Washington University as an undergraduate student, and he had been appointed to the bench. And the community in Bellingham, the Hispanic community, had a party, a celebration in his honor. And so that community had adopted me, who I was 6 hours from home, and they were my mentors. And then Judge Martinez became my mentor, and he became the first Latino that I ever met that was a judge. So that was very encouraging for me. But after college, I went to law school, and then when I practiced for the city attorney's office, I was encouraged. There was another Latina who was subsequently appointed to the bench, and her experience really kind of disappointed me. Not her herself, but what happened to her as a result of being appointed. The questions that came about, the criticisms, the things that were allowed to happen that certainly were not questions or criticisms that I felt would have occurred if she was not a woman of color. And I learned then and there that there was a presumption of competence that I was not going to be entitled to in anything that I did, particularly if I wanted to be a judge. So I made sure I got the experience. I was a prosecutor for many years there. Then I went to the National Labor Relations Board for a couple of years. Then I went back to prosecuting, and then I became an administrative law judge, where I did a number of types of cases, from unemployment hearings to child support matters to liquor control board cases. After that, during that time, I also had another mentor, Judge Michael Katoh, who was on the Seattle Municipal Court, who'd been a mentor for me since law school. And he invited me to pro tem for him, and that's what I did. He did night court at the time, so I was able, after working during the day, I'd be able to go to night court and get experience pro temming. I'd be able to pro tem on Saturdays. So when the municipal court judge job came along, I applied in a community in which I had never pro temmed, in which I knew nobody, and which was going to be an appointment, and there had already been an interim judge appointed for the last 6 months. So there was no way I thought I was going to get this job. I was very fortunate that my administrator, who's much more clever than I, chose the candidates that she really wanted to interview, and I was amongst those candidates based on the experience that I had. And she called another court and asked them to have me pro tem there, and then she secretly watched as I conducted court hearings. So apparently she liked what she saw, and that's what I did. Now, I'm a judge in a very small community. I will be running for election in that community. So I have learned to serve in that community. I'm a member of the Rotary in the local Des Moines, even though I live technically in the city of Seattle, but I'm very involved with the people there because I know ultimately those are the people that are going to help me retain my position. So what I would advise you is know what kind of judge you want to be, gain any relevant experience that you can, and when you start looking for the job, assume that you're going to be running immediately. And always do everything knowing that you will be running, and make sure that you batten down those hatches. By the time I run for election, I will have been a 6-year incumbent. But I know that I've taken all those steps that I need to, so that I'm not going to be looking at some of these groups the year that I run. I've been creating those bridges and those connections since I was appointed. So be part of the community that you serve.
Thank you. I'm going to turn next to Judge Michael Spearman.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Spearman. I am a court on the Court of Appeals, Division I. I was appointed by Governor Gregoire almost exactly a year ago to that position. Before that, I was going back, I guess, decades almost, it seems. I started out my legal career as a public defender. I did most of my trial work for approximately 10 to 12 years as a public defender. I had a couple years in private practice. But mostly I was with the King County Public Defender's Office, the Society of Counsel representing accused persons, and then about 6 months before my appointment, I went to work for the Federal Public Defender's Office. So I spent a few months there before I was appointed by Governor Lowry. Back at the time that I was initially appointed, I think there was some doubt about whether a public defender or a person with a primarily criminal defense background could be appointed to the bench. There was some thought that you had to either be a prosecutor or work at one of the downtown law firms as a partner before you would be considered by an appointing authority. And I don't know whether or not that is still a prevailing concept or not, but if any of you do feel that that's any sort of inhibition on choosing being a judge as a profession, I would encourage you not to allow that to make you hesitate or be reluctant to pursue a position as a judge. I think the most important thing that you can do is develop a reputation for hard work, a reputation for a sense of fairness and respect for the judicial system, a reputation for a willingness to listen and to be available to other parties. In particular, amongst your colleagues, opposing counsel, your clients, the other people that you may come in contact with, court staff, because when it comes time for the appointing authority to make a selection, or when you go to the Bar Association and are looking for a recommendation from them, they aren't going to just look at your the list of people that you've listed as your references. They are also going to talk to those folks who opposed you in court. And if you've been able to build up a reputation with them as a lawyer who has a concern for justice, then you have a good chance of impressing the appointing authority. The other point I would like to make is, and Justice Madsen, I think, intimated it just a little bit, is that running campaigns are difficult and hard things to do. But do not let the fact that you have to be elected stop you from, intimidate you in any way from pursuing the position of judge. There's a lot of, I think, question about whether or not electing judges is a good way to go, whether that's a wise way of selecting judges. After you've run a campaign or been involved in a campaign, I think you might be able to come up with a few good reasons about why we elect judges and why it is not such a bad idea. But I think the main thing is to keep in mind that if you're gonna run for election, that you have to do the work, you have to get out there, you have to meet people, talk to people, and not be worried about how difficult it's going to be, or worried about how much the campaign can cost. There are resources out there for learning how to conduct a campaign. I know people who have run in King County Superior Court who have spent as much as $150,000 to conduct a campaign. But I also know people who have spent $10,000, $15,000 or even less and have run successful campaigns for that position. So having the resources to make that run is one thing, but it's always possible to do regardless of the amount of money that you have. And don't let the fact that you have to conduct an election be something that'll hold you back.
Thank you. And I think one of the things I take from Judge Spearman's story also, though, is, by the way, is just his positive attitude. As many of you know, Judge Spearman ran for Supreme Court a few years ago and was endorsed by all the newspapers in the state, ran a very excellent campaign, and yet did not make it through the primary. But I think part of the lesson here is to not give up, because it was a few years after that then that the governor then appointed Judge Spearman to Division I of the Court of Appeals, and we're all very pleased to have him there. And again, your positive attitude about the experience of running for office is one that we can all probably take a lesson from. Going to hear from Judge Deborah Fleck next.
Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Fleck, and I'm a judge on the King County Superior Court, and I have been for almost 19 years now. As I was driving to my office one day back in 1987, I heard an announcement that Charlie Burdell had been appointed to the King County Superior Court, and I noted that we'd been in practice according to that story for about the same number of years, and we were the same age, and I thought to myself, well, I can do that. And I realize now that was pretty naive. I didn't pay too much attention to the fact that Charlie was a man, or that Charlie worked downtown in a big, prestigious law firm and had lots of connections. Probably didn't even think about those factors. I also didn't think about the fact that, unlike Veronica, I really didn't have any mentors in my practice. But what I did have was persistence and patience and passion, as the chief has said, for the law and wanting to move to the bench. But it did happen sort of like that for me, unlike some other people. And it was built on my experience as a female in the 1970s and into the 1980s in the profession, and I really thought that women had a lot to bring, not only to the profession, but also to the bench. So I started going down that path, going through the evaluation process, and there was a big bump in the road for me during that evaluation process. I did also ask to meet with judges before whom I had appeared. They weren't my friends, they were just judges before whom I had tried cases, and asked them for their advice and a description of their experience. And they were judges like Susan Agate and Ann Ellington, Charlie Burdell, and Faith Ireland. And they were wonderful in their willingness to share their experiences with me and give me their advice. And I think the advice that I received from Judge Agate was very good advice for me at that time, and I believe it would still be good advice for people now in terms of seeking an appointment. She said, don't overwhelm the governor with, don't paper the governor with tons of letters. Rather, determine who knows the governor and who the governor respects, and gather endorsement letters and endorsement contacts from people like that, and from a broad range, from people in the community, in business, in labor, as well as just judges and lawyers. So I really think that although the landscape changes, the appointing person changes, they may have different values and so on, nevertheless, that advice, I think, remains true. So I did that. I also looked for where the governor might be giving presentations, and Deanna said, oh, you stalked the governor, did you? And I didn't really think of it as stalking. I think maybe 19 years ago, maybe that wasn't a term that was particularly in common use, but I looked upon it as social and perhaps a political process, and I did find myself available to attend events where Governor Gardner was, and would find an opportunity to go up and greet him. And he had, I think, an eidetic memory, so he could remember people and faces and even names, which is a wonderful political skill that I don't have, but maybe you do. Then when you get to the interview process, I think it's very important to research the interview process, what questions the governor asks. Appointments can live or fail on the interview process. And I think you're lucky to have Judge Oishi here to give you the information that he has given you so far, and perhaps afterwards you can chat with him about what this governor is very interested in and what kinds of questions she asks, because you want to have thought through what your answers will be. I also I got myself on the short list somehow, but appointments would come and then they'd be given to somebody else, and an appointment would come up and it'd be given to somebody else. And I worked on this for 5 years, 5 long years, and I finally, you might say that takes persistence and patience to the level of insanity, but I persevered, and then I finally decided I just need to shift gears. I need to run for an election, and I put together what I thought was a very strong campaign. Had a wonderful campaign manager that I've spoken with some attorneys from Snohomish County about. She cleared the path for me, identified exactly what I needed to do and when I needed to do it, and gave me a timeline. And so I was 6 months into that process when the governor called and offered me an appointment. So I, of course, at that point was delighted to accept the position. I've been privileged. It's just been my joy to work as a judge, and it's a true privilege. It's a great honor to have the opportunity to serve as a judge. And you wake up every day wanting to make just decisions, no matter what small evidentiary decision or what large decision you have. I was fortunate, I think, because Governor Gardner did value diversity, and at that time gender diversity was a significant issue and continues to be. He valued diversity, and my practice was in family law, which has often been viewed as the second-class citizen in the law. I was appreciated the fact that he did not apparently carry that same bias, and also in the end, it was serendipitous in a way that Judge Ellington and Judge Agid were able to help me at the very last minute in terms of the appointment. He reportedly said to one of them, well, I'll appoint somebody else because Deb's got such a good campaign going, and you can't do that. You can't do that. Called up the other one. Finally, he said, okay, I'll appoint her. But I came that close. Nevertheless, I agree with Judge Spearman that even for those of us who don't feel comfortable campaigning, it is a wonderful experience. So either way, you might decide that it's important to shift gears, and it can help. The work you've done in seeking an appointment can certainly help you in seeking an election, and perhaps vice versa. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I encourage many of you to look into it.
Thank you, Judge Fleck. And for those of you who have not picked it up yet, really, I do commend to you the guide that has been put together in Washington State about how to run for judge or how to become a judge in Washington State. Judge Fleck was really, in many ways, the driving force behind that book that took a long time to put together, and that's why I let her go well over her time. But I will not do that for the rest of you. So everyone's going to have to keep going with the more brisk pace that we started earlier. So Judge Katoh, you are next, and I will keep you on time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eileen Katoh, and I'm on the King County District Court bench and sit in Seattle. And before I became a judge, my practice was in federal tax litigation and bankruptcy. So for those of you who are in area of practice and you think, I don't know how I can be a judge doing criminal work because I haven't done it in practice, but I did great in law school at it, there's still the opportunities that are out there. And at the time, I was active with the King County Bar Association and chair of their diversity committee. And as the chair, they paid for me to go to the ABA meeting in New York. This was in 1993. And so I felt obligated to go to as many of the diversity programs that they had available, since I was representing the diversity committee of the King County Bar. And one of the programs was on minority women judges. And I came in, and there was probably about the same group number here that was at the panel I went to. And so the judges were so great. And this was Constance Baker Motley, who is like a hero. I mean, she was NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Bernice Donald, who was a bankruptcy court judge at the time, and then is now a federal judge in Memphis, Tennessee, and is now waiting for an appointment to the Circuit Court of Appeals there. And Joyce Kennard, who's on the Supreme Court in California. And they said, just come on down and talk to us. We'll just make this much more informal. And so in talking to them, specifically Justice Kennard and Judge Donald said, well, give us your business card. You know, we think you should run for judge. Hadn't entered my mind. But I was so impressed and so inspired by these women. When I returned to Seattle, they actually called me on the phone and said, remember we met you? Yeah, I remember you guys. I just surprised you remember me. But they said, really think about it. We need more women. We need more diversity on the bench, and we encourage you to run. So that type of outreach mentoring, it's incredible the lives that you can touch. And I've tried to return the same to the women and people of color that I meet that I think would be great on the bench as well. So when I returned back to Seattle, and I got the call, and then about a week later, there was an article in the paper that a judge on the King County District Court bench would not be seeking re-election because he had some ethical issues that he was dealing with. And that would be for 1994. And I thought, that's the sign. So I decided to gear up a campaign, talk to many people, did cold calls to every Superior Court judge, every District Court judge, every Seattle Municipal Court judge, the Supreme Court, County Council, the City Council. And Washington State is amazing because people are so receptive when you say, can I get 5 minutes of your time? And I would ask them for advice on how to run for office, Who should I talk to? And while, the names were new to me at the time, but then pretty soon it was the same names they were giving me over and over again. And so I talked to all of those people as well. Some of them were union people, some were in the community. But it was, I just really got wrapped up in it. And then when I went to the King County Women's Political Caucus campaign workshop, it was one weekend, it was outstanding. And the thing that I remember most from that workshop is they said, do a gut check. If you don't have that passion and that fire in your gut to go for that position, then you shouldn't. Then it's not your time. I had that fire in my gut, so I just went for it, assuming it was going to be for election. Now, in Seattle, it's primarily a Democratic base, so I really campaigned hard with the Democrats for the election. Then the judge was removed from office. I think he was the first judge removed by the Supreme Court in May of 1994. And filing at that time was the last week of July. And so I thought they would just proceed for it to go to election, but the county council decided, no, we'll appoint instead. So I had to switch gears. So I have had the distinct pleasure of going both in the same, as well as Judge Fleck. So I had to switch from the election to the appointment process. At the time, it was majority Republicans on the King County Council. Now, the interesting thing on this one is that I was concerned because by going through the appointment process in Seattle at the time, 2 of the 5 judges on that bench were Asian American. Man, there's no way they're going to do that. There are no African Americans, there are no Latinos, there are no Native Americans on this bench. Why would they appoint a 3rd Asian American? So I just decided, well, I'm in gear here. I've still got that gut check here, and so I just decided to proceed. And the amazing thing is I was also active in a number of community organizations, one of which was the Empty Space Theater, which is now defunct. But I was on their board of directors for a number of years, primarily because of my bankruptcy background. And everyone knows what happened to the Empty Space, as well as, unfortunately, a number of other theaters. But the president at the time said, is there anything I can do to help you with your campaign? I can make some phone calls. I said, oh, I appreciate it, whatever you can do. Not knowing at the time that this person was a huge Republican contributor over on the East Side. And he picked up the phone and he called council members, and it was I think it was a 9-member council at the time, and I got 6 of the votes, which were half Republican votes and all the Democratic votes. So you never know. They appointed the 3rd Asian to the bench, Republican-dominated council, and you just never know what's going to happen. So you do have to believe in yourself and persevere. Campaigning to me was wonderful. I'd never run for hall monitor, even in elementary school, so the whole campaign process was new to me. It's very exciting, but you have to prepare yourself because it is a grind. Sometimes 3 and 4 dinners a night, and always happy, always on. But it's so rewarding, and it's been an honor and a privilege to serve since 1994 on the bench.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next, we're going to hear from Judge Eric Lucas.
I love that line, always happy, always on. I'm going to tell my story a little bit differently because I think it's somewhat organic. And my career really starts with my parents. My parents were the owners and operators of electrical contracting company. I was a contractor's kid. And from the age of 23 to the age of 28, I basically ran the company on a day-to-day basis. From 1974 to 1980, we wired the Everett Mall, the U.S. Pavilion at Expo 74. We did the electrical rehabilitation at the Hiram M. Chittenden Locks, also known as the Ballard Locks. We took over and completed the electrical system at the Washington State Convention Center, the one that goes over the freeway, when that contractor went out of business. Around 1982, my dad granted me permission to go to law school. And in 1986, I graduated from Harvard Law School, and the idea was that I would come back and represent black contractors and my dad's company. However, once you get into law school, you find out a few things, and I found that I could never do that without trial experience. So I sought out a job at the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office and was hired. And while I was there, within the first 3 years, I had a high-profile case that ended up on national TV. And when I left, Rick Martinez was my trial team supervisor on the Special Drug Enforcement Unit. I returned to my dad's business, to sort of follow through with the with the dictates from my father. And one thing led to another, and I eventually opened my own law firm on April 1st, 1990. From my construction experience, I developed an expertise in municipal law and small corporation law. In 1999, Snohomish County announced the new 14th position on the Superior Court bench, and my wife encouraged me to apply, and I thought she was just wrong. I was unknown, but to my surprise, I made the final four and was interviewed by Governor Locke. That was when Ellen Baird was appointed, and after that, however, I was appointed by the members of the bench to the pro tem list, which I'd been trying to get on for about 3 or 4 years. In 2002, and I'm skipping a bunch of stuff, I was appointed as an administrative appeals judge for the Washington State Environmental Hearings Office in Olympia, actually Lacey. And I commuted from Everett to Lacey for 3 years. So from 1999 to 2004, there were a number of appointments made in Snohomish County, and Governor Locke's office had asked us to wait because they did not feel that a black man could win an election in Snohomish County. So my wife and I did not agree with that. I think this is the passion part. And in 2004, I turned 50, and I decided I could not afford to wait any longer, and a number of attorneys and some of the members of the bench were encouraging me to challenge the sitting judge named David Hulbert. No one thought we had much of a chance. Then we got some key endorsements. The first endorsement, major endorsement, was from Everett Mayor Ray Stephenson, who also gave me some really great advice on campaigning. The next one was from Aaron Reardon, who's the county executive. I had known Hugh Spitzer for a long time and had worked with him when I was city attorney from Langley, and he opted in real quickly. And then Governor Locke endorsed us. We won. At that time, I knew that I was the first person of color to serve on the bench in Snohomish County, but there's a local reporter there who's now retired, Jim Haley, and the night of the election, he also informed us of a few things which sort of scared us. The first thing was that I was the first person of color to serve in a county-wide elected position in the history of the county, and that I was the first person to defeat an incumbent judge in 50 years. That was in 2004. In 2008, Judge Hulbert filed against me, and he ran a smear campaign against us. This time we had endorsements from our bench and every member of the Supreme Court of Washington except Justices Sanders and Jim Johnson. And we prevailed again. Don't laugh. There's a reason. My advice is, and this is the reason why I tell the story the way I told it, be involved in your community. The way I look at this is not just a resume builder where you check off the points on the list. Be involved in your community other than being involved in the bar association. I always say that if you have children, this shouldn't be too hard. This was mentioned by, I think, a couple other people too. Do your most professional work wherever you are. Always do the highest level of professionalism. That's how I got to know Hugh Spitzer. He was bond counsel to the city of Langley. And I'll echo Justice Madsen's words about passion. You have to have passion. In our situation, it was because we grew up in Snohomish County, and we sort of started feeling like things were not progressing. And if you know my wife, as some of you guys do out there, she's very, very intense and public-spirited, and I'm a little bit like that too, only a little more quietly, and that was the reason that we were in.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next, we're going to hear from Judge Tambuli, also from Snohomish County.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tambu, and I sit on the District Court bench in Snohomish County. And my path to the bench, I started as a public defender, so I am another example of the misperception, if you have that perception still, that a public defender cannot get on the bench. And I got on the bench by election. I took the position after the retiring, the judge who's occupied that position for 30 plus years retired. So it was an open position, and there were, I believe, 4 others who ran for that. And I'm the first person of color on the district court bench in Snohomish County. I did not know that I wanted to become a judge until after I started as working as the administrative law judge for the state. And how that came about is because during that, in that position, I would hear cases from litigants who are persons of color, their employment cases, and they presented their stories through their lens. They're mostly immigrants, and I was sitting making their decision. And I had the sense that I was a fair decision maker because nobody walked off or stormed out or had any extreme reactions, and everybody was very polite. And I thought, well, and I was an immigrant. I came to this country in 1970s, and the rule of law, and I was very passionate about that, so that kind of stirred my path toward wanting to become a judge on the bench. And an opportunity came up, and I seized upon that opportunity. My tips for if you would like to sit on the bench, this is from the perspective of a person who ran an election campaign, and I think regardless of the jurisdiction that you are in, I think these tips will apply. First of all, there's nothing wrong with having a consultant. I think they are very helpful either to reinforce or to supplement the things that are going on in your campaign. But when it really comes down to it, money can't buy the hard work that you have to put in. No amount of money will do that. And for what I mean by hard work is, one, you have to prepare yourself. You have to put yourself out there. What I mean by preparing yourself is, what do you have to do to get there? You have to seek out what is relevant, and pro-temming is one of those relevant things. It doesn't have to be in your particular jurisdiction. It can be from another jurisdiction. To talk to the judges, make those cold calls. That first cold call is going to be very difficult, but it gets easier as you go along. Seek endorsements, and I don't mean just the endorsements from individuals or labor organizations. The endorsement I'm talking about is your community endorsement, and that is get involved in your community. Sit down and think about what you're passionate about. If you're passionate about education, go volunteer at the local schools. Go volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club. Talk to the teens out there who are thinking of dropping out or not thinking of furthering their education. Those kinds of community endorsements, that's what I'm talking about, because if you're involved in that, you get recognized. You are more aware of your community. You're invested in it. And when you go out doorbelling, that investment will be picked up and perceived by the person who opens the door when you go out and doorbell. It's those subtle things. It's not the obvious things. And I will tell you that voters are perceptive. Yes, there are those voters out there that ask the very odd questions, but for the majority, voters are very perceptive, and they will pick up on that. I mentioned briefly about doorbelling. I doorbelled about 8 to 5, 8 to 9, depending on the summer months.
Not 8 to 9 a.m., 8 to 9, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m.,
yes.
Correct?
Yes, that's correct. Now, I know I want all of you to think it's continuous, but it really isn't. I did take breaks. But you have to physically prepare yourself for the physical and emotional aspect of it. Obviously, you have to take care of yourself in order for you to have that stamina. You've often heard that it's a marathon. It really is. And you want to be the one that's standing up and the first one to reach the finish line. So you have to take care of yourself, and also the emotional aspect too. So be prepared for that. I don't want to take any more time. I am going to be available, so please come and introduce yourself and ask questions after the reception.
Give everybody your business cards, like Judge Katoh said to do that. I think that's good advice. Give everyone here your business cards. Next, we're going to hear from Judge Carol McRae.
Thank you, Deanna. I see so many faces I recognize. It's a bit intimidating to speak to people that I know. I think we're all aware that opportunity comes in many fashions. It can come as a whisper. Mine happened to come as a hurricane followed by a bucket of cold water. I was busy working in the Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office when two of my colleagues came in and said, Judge Ellen Fair has just been appointed to the Superior Court bench, and there's going to be a position open on the District Court bench. And we don't think that you're going to get it, but we think somebody from the office should put their name in, and you live in South County. So I thought about that, and District Court was always a passion for me. I loved it when I was a deputy prosecuting attorney, not too long out of law school. And I loved it when I was in private practice and I did defense work. And so it just seemed like it would be a good fit. But I didn't get a lot of encouragement from my colleagues. I did get my encouragement from the public defender's office, many of my associates who worked on the other side of the table, and a number of the attorneys in the private defense bar were very, very supportive. So don't ever underestimate where your support is going to come from. And don't let people rain on your parade. One of my first concerns was I hadn't pro tem'd. And I know that I hear that from people, and they say I haven't pro tem'd. The other thing that I thought about is I haven't done any networking. I haven't prepared. And I have a total of about 6 weeks to get ready. We have all been networking our entire lives, every one of us. We know way more people and way more people who are connected with other people than you would ever believe. Use those contacts. I had been a Teamster. I contacted the Teamsters Union and I said, you know, District Court, we deal with lots of driving issues, kind of important to the Teamsters Union. Would you maybe talk to some of your other labor folks? And I talked to different people that I had had contact with. One of my best supporters, I had represented a young man when I was doing private defense work. One of his relatives turned out to be the owner of the collection agency that did the collection work for Snohomish County. And he was immensely supportive of me. I think that have faith in yourself. What I had a hard time overcoming was I looked at my past, I was a UPS truck driver, as an impediment. And how was I going to get around the appointment process, talk to these professionals, these council people, and explain why I had spent 12 years wearing a brown uniform. And interestingly enough, it was the hook that I think caught their imagination. They were fascinated by the fact that I had had a career before I decided to go to law school. And so you are all special. You all have a special story. I guess the one thing I'd like everybody to take away is have faith in yourself. And if it's something that you really want, we've all talked about passion, but that is the word. And Deanna, thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, Judge Marilyn Peja. And we're going to have to hand a mic down to Judge Peja.
Got it. So I come from Kitsap County, which is a relatively small community. There weren't very many places to doorbell when I finally ran for election. I've been a judge for 23 years. I spent the first 13 years as a part-time judge for a small town, the city of Gig Harbor. When I started, it was a half day a week, and I was appointed. So I had an electorate of one, that is the mayor. And actually, I didn't have to ask her for a vote. She came to me. I had had an opportunity because the lawyer that I worked for at the time was the judge for that town. I pro tem'd for him and started doing that within just a couple of years of becoming licensed. And she had seen me in court, and she wanted to appoint a woman to the bench. And she'd solicited the only vote that she cared about at the time, which was the police chief. And he also had endorsed me. So I was appointed then to serve on the Gig Harbor Municipal Court. And at the time, it was certainly flattering. It was a wonderful thing for Mayor Bogue to do, and I found as I went along that this was not the only woman who was willing to help my career. Like Justice Madsen and Judge Fleck, I graduated from law school in 1979, a similar kind of time. It was about 10 to 12% of women were graduating from law school in my class. Very few of us went into criminal law. I worked for a private law firm, a lawyer who did large criminal defense kinds of cases, and also personal injury work, because I'd worked as an administrative assistant and a secretary beforehand, before I went to law school. I actually spent a couple of years working as in a law firm before I went to law school, and then even as a first and second year law student, I was able to do legal kind of work, so I was able to hit the ground running, which kind of was a good thing for my career, but it was also something that enables me to sort of point to several moments that, I spent my time in high school, in college, and in law school working. I worked my way and paid my way. My parents didn't contribute anything, except their love and support, I should say. But they were unable to contribute anything financially, which at the time seemed like a huge deal. So I spent my time in college and law school really looking down, going straight ahead. Can I finish 4 years of college in 3? How can I make this happen? But there were moments that stood out to me. I will never, ever forget when I was working as a secretary before I went to law school, when my boss came up to me, excuse me, Justice Madsen, and said, "Nice job. I can't believe a college graduate could do that." And I can still remember that I came home from work that day and I said, "Okay, well, I'm not going to be staying here. What can I do?" And that's when I decided I was going to go to law school, and I went. I applied, and within 2 months I'd been accepted and started law school because of that moment, that one little moment, which I did not thank the gentleman for, but I certainly could now. And then another moment happened to me when I was working at a law firm as a Rule 9 and had an experience of sexual harassment by one of the law partners toward me, which in my workaholic little student world had never occurred to me could happen to me. And I was shocked. It was just an awful kind of thing, but it was also something that made me sort of sit up and look around the world a little bit more than what I had been doing. So for me, becoming a lawyer and then having this opportunity, which I looked upon as an opportunity to make me a better advocate for my clients. By learning how to be a judge, I was going to learn to be a better advocate, and certainly I think that happened. I then learned to really enjoy the position of being the neutral decision maker, and learned that I think had an opportunity to both do good work and to feel good about doing it. So I was able then to do things that I had some control over. Because I was an appointed judge, I could go to judicial training. I could get myself on other pro tem lists, which I had never done before. I signed up for the Superior Court arbitrator lists. Took the 40-hour mediator training that's available through dispute resolution. And while I was doing this job as the municipal court judge, I had a full-time law practice. And varying numbers of associates, usually 3 or so associates that were working for me. But my law practice became devoted toward civil law because I was much more interested in pursuing, as a long-term goal, getting onto the bench. And so I took those steps to try to do it. I did apply to the governor's office, was interviewed on a short list by 2 governors, did not get the appointment. And so when an opening arose for the first time in 16 years, there was a vacancy on the Kitsap County bench. In this case, in the district court, I decided to run. There were 4 persons who ran, so it was a spirited campaign. I spent the least. There was one person who spent almost $100,000 in our county. That was unheard of. I spent about 40 in the entire election and won pretty convincingly. So it was a very interesting experience, one that there were people who encouraged me to run, but there were also those who said that because the district court did so much criminal work, as all courts do now, I think that a woman would have a hard time handling the criminal practice. But for me, having been patted on top of the head that one time and knowing how in different ways I could see that that happens throughout our community, that was something I wasn't going to let deter me at all. Campaigning, though, is hard work, and I think I told Deanna, I had a goal for myself, was to go to at least 2 events every single day that I was running for office. I had 3 small children at the time. They were 7, 5, and 5. So the deal made with my husband was that if I had something that I could do with at least one of the children, that I would take them with me. And so they spent a lot of time. I didn't doorbell too much unless I had a campaign person who was really wanted me to do it. That wasn't my cup of tea. But I did go to supermarkets, and I would bring along the little kids' picnic table, coloring books, lots of sweet, sugary treats. But they had their Vote for My Mom t-shirt, and it was really good at getting people to stop and talk and give them my campaign literature. So there are different ways to do it depending upon your community. But what I will say is that I took it upon me, it was my job to be the best, the hardest working candidate that I could be, and to make it worthwhile that I was involving so many people and, you know, what turned out to be a real successful campaign.
Thank you.
So I encourage anybody to run if you can't do it another way.
Thank you. And finally, we're going to hear from Judge Ricardo Martinez, who's on the federal court bench.
Thank you. And I sit on the federal bench here for the Western District of Washington. You know, I'm struck by several common themes that you're hearing up here. One is, you know, patience, perseverance, passion, no doubt. Also, you're listening to some amazing stories of individuals that had always had faith in themselves. And regardless of whatever hurdles may be placed in their way, we're able to overcome that. The third thing I'm really struck by is, since I know most of these people up here, is I can't believe how old they're getting. Anyway, I've had the distinct pleasure of being sworn into 3 different judicial positions, and the one pleasure I've never had is running for election. And thank goodness now I don't ever have to think about that and worry about that. But I was with the King County Prosecutor's Office for my career. When I came out of law school, there were a lot of reasons why I went to law school, but the main primary reason was I wanted to be the best public defender I could possibly be. So I spent 10 years at the prosecutor's office, but that's a whole nother story. We don't have time to talk about that. Judge Fleck and I have something else in common, aside from being former colleagues on the King County Superior Court bench. Charlie Burdell. Charlie Burdell was the judge who stepped down, created a slot for me to take. And it's really interesting about that particular connection. Charlie Burdell realized he didn't really like being a Superior Court judge. There were other things he wanted to do, and he went on, of course, to be very, very successful in those other things that he did. But that opened up that slot. And I still remember vividly that phone call from Governor Gardner to me, asking if I wanted the job. And I still remember the very last thing that he said to me as we talked about the same sorts of things that you heard from Judge Lucas, about, you know, looking for the perfect judge, you know, and you heard the comments about, you know, these are the type of characteristics that I'm looking for. And I will always remember the very last thing he said to me before he hung up the phone, after he said, I'm going to release the press release this afternoon. He said, Rick? And I go, yes, Governor. He goes, don't screw it up. Hey, you know, we got to know each other, all right? So he knew me. But I spent almost 9 years on the King County Superior Court bench, just loving the job. I never was challenged for any election cycle, but I worried about it every single time. The very first time you go on the bench, you got to stand for election that very same year. And that was a nerve-wracker. And then every 4 years after that, I had a chance and an opportunity to go on the appellate courts. And I really thought about it, and it was very humbling to be approached and be thought of as someone that could fill that slot. But I knew I wouldn't like the job itself. I'm a trial judge. I've been a trial lawyer. I was a trial judge in Superior Court. I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I can't move up any further in the appellate level, then where else can I go? And I thought, well, the highest position you can go is to be a United States District Court judge. So what would it take? All right, this is easy. I've been appointed to the Superior Court bench. It's just to check out the process. So just get the president to nominate you, get Congress to, wait a minute, how many presidents do I know? I don't know very many. I know who my senators are. I don't think I've ever met them. How do I get there? And you heard the same theme coming all the way through. The very first thing you've got to do is identify what it is you want and why you want it. And the fact that you've got to have the fire in your belly to go after it. Because there's going to be a lot of hurdles, no matter what. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, there's going to be a ton of hurdles in your way. And they're all going to be unique to you. So what could I do? I can't get the attention of anyone at any level to become a federal judge. There's 768 Article III judges that are, full-time active judges right now in the country. That's a small club, all right? So how do I get there? I can't. Well, wait, where else can I go? Well, they have such a thing called a magistrate judge, who is not appointed by the president, not confirmed by the Senate, simply confirmed by the judges of that district court in your area. So I thought maybe that's my way to get my foot in the door. So I applied, along with 57 other people. So there were 58 of us. I made the top 5. I show up, all the judges, all the federal judges in the Western District sitting there interviewing me at a table. First question asked of me by the chief judge, why do you want to be a magistrate judge? And my reaction, my response to him was, well, actually, I want your job, but I can't get there right now, so let me tell you, I'm going to be the best magistrate judge you ever had. Spent almost 6 years as a magistrate judge. Had a great job, lots of fun, tons of experience. Federal bar got to know me, and then a miracle happened. One of our sitting active judges was appointed to a national level position, Judge Barbara Rothstein, created another opening, and next thing you know, this little kid from Whatcom County who grew up picking berries, strawberries and raspberries and living in a migrant camp is on his way walking from the perimeter security area to the west wing of the White House to interview for a job. That was the most amazing 40 yards walk I've ever taken in my entire life. And people have asked me this in the past. Were you really nervous? Were you nervous about that whole thing? And I said, I was really nervous leading up to it. The night before, I think I probably got 3 hours of sleep maximum. My appointment was at 1 o'clock. I showed up at 11:15. I was maybe a little apprehensive, but you know what? Once they actually came to get me, and once I walked back in there and just took that deep breath, and all that just disappeared because I had done everything I possibly could to be ready for that time. And now this is showtime. This is what any trial lawyer can do, and it was actually kind of fun. It's an amazing job. It's an amazing process, and I understand how lucky and how humble. I try to be humble, thinking about how lucky I am to have gotten this particular position because it's very, very, very difficult. It's not something that you can say, I'm going to target and this is what's going to happen, because you have no control over all of these factors. But if you're not ready when that opportunity knocks, then you're not going to be able to do it, regardless of whatever position you choose to go for. And the only other last bit of advice that I leave you with is this, and you've heard this from all the people that have talked about the appointing authority. You've got to do your homework. Just like any other thing you prepare for, you've got to be ready. What's in it for that individual to appoint you? They've got a ton of people to choose from. The short list that we talked about, that's 5, maybe 6 names. There's a much longer list that's part of that. You're talking about 25 people on there. Why should they look at you versus the 24 other people that are on that list? And when you can answer that, and when you can look in that mirror and say, because I'm the best candidate that there is, and that self-worth and that understanding that I can do the job, and look at my track record throughout my entire career, I've done nothing but the most professional work possible, then you're ready, and go for it. That's all I can say. Have faith in yourself, go for it. And She saved the last, me for last, not because I'm the best, but because she knows how difficult it is to get federal judges to shut up. But
Well, I'm very inspired, and I just want to say that you all told me that I could not get everyone done within an hour and 15 minutes, and we actually have a couple minutes left, and I'm going to use my moderator's privilege because we have another judge in the room, and I was told that I could not have him on this panel because he was on another panel, but I'd actually like to ask Judge Steve Gonzalez to come down and just give us a couple pieces of advice based on his experience too, because I want to say we got 12 judges into this panel and let people know. Can you come down for just 1 minute and tell us a couple of words, Judge Gonzalez?
Sure. I can't do it from here because we're being recorded.
We're being recorded, so if you can come down. And while you're coming down, actually, I'm going to do something with this panel because I heard a lot of common themes when I was talking to all of you. How many of you, and I know the answer for Judge Fleck, but how many of you had a mentor at some point in your career that encouraged you to become a judge?
In law?
Encourage you in law and encourage you to become a judge.
No.
Okay? Not everybody, but many of you. And by the way, I will again recommend you to speak to Tanya Clayhouse, who's working on a mentorship project here. If you're interested in becoming a mentor as a judge, any of you on the panel today, if you're in the audience, an attorney who wants to become a judge, please talk to Tanya about this exciting project she's working on. How many of you were recruited by either a judge or an attorney in your community to run and asked to consider running? How many of you didn't think about having a career in the judiciary until you were encouraged by others to do so? How many of you have been involved in non-legal volunteer work in your communities? How many of you see a need for judicial candidates to have broad-based community support? How many of you think attorneys interested in a career in the judiciary have to be prepared to take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves? And Judge Gonzalez, I'm going to let you speak for a second now before I finish up my questions. Just for a couple of seconds, if you could give us a couple of pieces of advice.
I'll be fairly quick. I wanted to say to Judge Martinez that I hope he continues not to screw up because I'm frequently mistaken for him. I'm not offended by that. He's a handsome man. Don't get me wrong. But it's often funny. Even my own colleagues sometimes will call me Judge Martinez. So I want you to continue to be on your best behavior if you don't mind. I've been on the Superior Court bench now for 9 years. Governor Locke appointed me there, and I did have an opponent right away and ran. And we had lost. My wife, who was pregnant at the time, and I would have been unemployed collectively. So it was a fairly risky thing to do, and in retrospect, maybe not the smartest thing. But I'm so very glad to be on the bench. I was a prosecutor, both locally and federally. I was in private practice doing commercial litigation before that. And on the bench, I've done a variety of the calendars. And the message that I would suggest is not to reject yourself. Let others reject you. Don't do it for them. And also give them the chance to embrace you instead, because you'll never know if you don't try. And I'm just so encouraged by the courage that I know exists on this panel here, who've stepped forward and put themselves in the process and allowed themselves to be embraced. Not always the first time, but allowed themselves to be embraced and let others reject them if they would, but elect them if they would. And lately in my life, I've been encouraged by a number of the current Supreme Court justices to put my name in for the state Supreme Court, and I've done that. So I'm hopeful, and I'm not going to reject myself. I'm going to let others make that decision for me.
Thank you, Your Honor. Before we wrap up, I want to ask a couple more questions. How many of you have been told that you have or think part of your path to the bench was that you had a good reputation for integrity and fairness among your colleagues and your opposing counsels before you got on the bench? How many of you got involved, partly ran for judge or sought judicial office because you cared about improving access to justice in the justice system? How many of you are currently actively engaged in efforts to improve the justice system? Everyone. And how many of you care about improving diversity on the bench? And how many of you would be willing to talk to people here in the audience who are interested in a career in the judiciary about their goals for that? Everybody. So you've got your lesson. We don't have time for questions, but we have a networking reception right now. So please do stick around. On behalf of Justice at Stake and on behalf of the Minority Bar Association Collaboration Project, thank you for being here to all our panelists and to all our guests. Please consider a career in the judiciary. It's important. Thank you.